This course was arranged around the topic of economic inequality, and we started the semester by reading a 19th century novel called Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. This novel is about factory workers in Manchester, England during the Industrial Revolution in 1847. And these are people who work in very dangerous conditions for very little money. And they live, as you can see in this other picture, in even worse conditions. Another novelist, Benjamin Disraeli, who also wrote about poor people in industrial cities, and he was also the Prime Minister of England, described England as being really two nations, the rich and the poor. In other words, your experience of living in England really depended on whether you were rich or whether you were poor. It was a totally different country for these people. And I've been thinking about this particular passage from Mary Barton for a long time. In this passage, the factory at which many of the workers work has burned down due to an accident. And while they are waiting for the factory to be repaired and parts of it to be rebuilt, it's a very different experience depending on whether you are rich or poor. The weekly drain of wages given for labor, useless in the present state of the market, was stopped. The partners had more leisure than they had known for years and promised wives and daughters all manner of pleasant excursions as soon as the weather should become more genial. It was a pleasant thing to be able to lounge over breakfast with a review or newspaper in hand, to have time for becoming acquainted with agreeable and accomplished daughters, on whose education no money had been spared, but whose fathers, shut up during a long day with calicoes and accounts, had so seldom had leisure to enjoy their daughters' talents. There were happy family evenings, now that the men of business had time for domestic enjoyments. There is another side to the picture. There were homes over which Carson's fire threw a deep, terrible gloom. The homes of those who would fain work, and no man gave unto them. The homes of those to whom leisure was a curse. There the family music was hungry wails when week after week passed by, and there was no work to be had, and consequently no wages to pay for the bread the children cried aloud for in their young impatience of suffering. There was no breakfast to lounge over. Their lounge was taken in bed, to try and keep warmth in them that bitter March weather, and by being quiet to deaden the gnawing wolf within. So this experience of the factory, when the factory can't run, is very different if you're rich and if you're poor. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately during the pandemic, while we were quarantined and sheltering in place, and how different that experience is for some people. For some people, this is a time of leisure. It's a time to do yoga and bake bread and, of course, watch Netflix. But for other people, it's a very different time. Parents are juggling, trying to do their work from home and also trying to teach their children. The whole families are just thrown into a kind of chaos by trying to homeschool and do work and balance all these things. And of course, these are not even the worst problems. There's potentially more hunger, more disease, severe unemployment approaching levels not seen since the Great Depression. So this experience of quarantine is very different for different groups of people. And whether it's 1848 or 2020, whether it's Manchester, England, or America, or really anywhere else, this is a global pandemic. The virus really shows us that there are still two nations or two worlds, those of the rich and those of the poor. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been home trying to do my work and trying to homeschool my children, and there has been very little bread and very little Netflix. But I can still be thankful that I still have my job.